The biggest housing bill in over 30 years just became law, and almost nobody is talking about the part that should make your jaw drop. According to the New York Times, this is the most significant housing legislation since 1990, 36 years. And it didn't get a signing ceremony, it didn't get a presidential signature. It became law on July 11, 2026, without the president's signature because Trump used it as a bargaining chip in a completely unrelated political fight. And buried inside the bill itself is a loophole so obvious that the stocks of the companies it's supposed to hurt actually went up the day it passed. So here's what this video is about. The 21st Century Road to Housing Act is now law. Most coverage is either celebrating it as a historic win for homebuyers or dismissing it as political theater. The real story is somewhere more interesting than either of those takes. We're going to walk through exactly what's in this bill, why the drama around it is stranger than you've heard, why the bill's biggest headline provision may not do what people think it does, and what this actually means for home prices going forward. Because there's one piece of this, buried at the end, that almost nobody is talking about, and it changes the whole picture. Let's start with why this bill even exists, because the problem it's trying to solve is genuinely severe. A recent Zillow analysis found the cost of buying a starter home is $1 million or more in a record 242 cities across the country. Read that again. A starter home, $1 million in 242 cities. According to Redfin, a family needs an income of about $117,000 a year to afford the typical home on the market, almost $30,000 more than what most American households earn. And according to Realtor.com, a household making $75,000 a year can afford fewer than a quarter of the home listings available. So the pressure to do something was enormous. And for once, Congress actually moved. After months of back and forth between the Senate and the House, the two chambers reached an agreement on a comprehensive bipartisan housing package. The Senate passed it 85-5, and the House passed it 358-32. Those are veto-proof margins. Almost nobody voted against this thing. It's packed with more than 40 provisions contributed by both Republicans and Democrats on everything from corporate home ownership to manufactured home construction. Now here's where the story gets strange, and this is the part I want you to hold on to because it connects to something I'll show you at the end. Back in May, Trump publicly posted on Truth Social telling Congress it should pass the Senate's version of this exact bill. He wanted it. His administration was pushing for it. The Trump administration directed prominent individuals in the MAGA movement to encourage the House to pass the Senate bill outright. His own White House press secretary later called it one of the most significant pieces of housing legislation in American history. And then, roughly 2 months later, he called it a big yawn. On Truth Social, Trump dismissed the bill as of minor importance and canceled a White House signing ceremony, stipulating that he would only sign if Congress passed a strict voter ID bill called the Save America Act. So the housing bill, the one he'd publicly demanded, became collateral in a completely separate political fight. The Save America Act would require proof of citizenship to register to vote and photo ID to cast a ballot. It had stalled in the Senate, where it doesn't have the 60 votes to pass. A bill about housing was being held hostage over a bill about voting, which wasn't even close to passing. That's the situation. Less than 2 hours before the planned signing, Trump posted on social media that the housing news conference and signing was canceled until Congress passed the Save America Act. Lawmakers were already gathered on Capitol Hill. The ceremony was scheduled, and then it just didn't happen. What followed was genuinely bizarre. He still showed up to a scheduled Senate Republican lunch right after pulling the plug, and the conversation reportedly devolved into an argument between Trump and Senator Bill Cassidy, not about housing, but about the war in Iran. The housing bill was barely mentioned. Meanwhile, Republican lawmakers were left scrambling when the president abruptly withdrew his support over a separate political fight. The one Republican who publicly called him out on it was Senator Bill Cassidy, who called it irresponsible to hold up housing relief over an unrelated voting bill. But here's the detail that tells you everything about how Washington actually works. Cassidy had already lost his primary to a Trump-backed challenger. He had nothing left to lose politically, and that's exactly what it took for one Republican to say it out loud. Under the Constitution, a bill that has passed both houses of Congress automatically becomes law if the president doesn't sign or veto it within 10 days, excluding Sundays. So that's what happened. The bill became law without President Trump's signature on July 11, 2026. No ceremony, no signature, no credit claimed, just law by default. Now let's get into what the bill actually does, because this is where most coverage stops being useful. The bill focuses on ways to increase the supply of housing, fixing up existing homes that have fallen into disrepair, and encouraging local governments to ease permitting restrictions that add time and cost to building. That's the core of it, more supply. The logic is simple. Realtor.com estimated that last year the U.S. was short by more than 4 million housing units. When you have a shortage that severe, prices go up. So the answer, in theory, is build more. Some of the specific provisions are genuinely useful. One provision allows developers to skip an environmental review if a house is going up between two buildings that were already reviewed. That sounds small, but environmental reviews are one of the biggest delays in home building. Another provision creates a grant program communities can use to develop pre-approved housing designs that would need fewer approvals before construction. Less red tape, faster builds. The bill also encourages local governments to speed up the home building process by giving more federal dollars to places that build more housing. So cities and towns that actually build get rewarded. The ones that don't lose out. There's also a provision around manufactured homes, which are significantly cheaper than traditional stick-built homes. The bill removes some regulatory barriers that were adding costs to that market, and for first-time buyers, that could actually matter in the near term. But here's the catch that every expert agrees on. Even if builders start new development projects, additional homes will take time to hit the market, and any affordability improvements won't be felt for years. This also explains why Congress hasn't bothered with housing legislation for so long. A single development, from construction start to market, can take longer than an elected official's term. So if you're waiting for this law to make your rent check smaller next month, that's not how this works. One researcher says that over the medium to long term, the legislation has the potential to reduce housing prices, but not over the short term, not in the next 2 years. Now here's the part that almost nobody is covering correctly, and this is the thing I want you to really pay attention to. The flashiest part of this whole bill, the piece that got the most headlines, is the ban on large corporate investors buying single-family homes. The law includes a first-of-its-kind limit by prohibiting any investor that owns more than 350 single-family homes from buying any more. Wall Street landlords, corporate investors, the villain of the housing story finally getting reined in. That's how it was sold, and it sounds satisfying, but there are 3 things wrong with that picture. First, the scale of the problem being targeted is much smaller than the framing suggests. Research from John Burns, Research and Consulting found that investors owning 350 or more properties hold just 0.7% of America's roughly 92 million single-family homes. The Urban Institute separately estimated large institutional investors own about 574,000 homes out of 15.1 million single-family rentals, roughly 1%. The vast majority of investor-owned homes belong to mom-and-pop landlords who own fewer than 10 properties. The bill targets the 1%. The other 99% of investor-owned homes? Untouched. Second, researchers at Freddie Mac say private equity is only a small driver of the housing shortage, since they typically buy up cheap homes in need of significant repair. Staff at both the left-leaning Urban Institute and the right-leaning Taxpayers Protection Alliance argue private equity can actually improve the housing shortage by renovating homes that would have otherwise fallen out of the market. So the left and the right, for once, agree. The bill's central villain may not actually be the villain. Third, and this is the one that should make you stop and think, the law doesn't compel mega investors that currently own more than 350 properties to sell anything. They can keep every single home they already have. They just can't buy more existing homes going forward. And even that restriction has a carve-out baked into the final text. The law only blocks them from buying existing houses outright. It doesn't stop them from buying from each other, and it doesn't stop them from expanding through new construction. The final version keeps the direct ban, but excludes a wide swath of build-to-rent and renovate-to-rent properties from that ban. So the companies this law was supposed to hurt, how did they react? The stocks of major single-family rental REITs went up the day the law took effect. Analyst firms reiterated outperform ratings on them, arguing the law actually strengthens large landlords' competitive position because the carve-out for new construction means the big players can keep growing through building, while smaller competitors face more restrictions. The law may have accidentally entrenched the very players it was designed to limit. And then there's one more thing buried in this bill that has nothing to do with housing at all. The same legislation that's supposed to fix the housing market includes a rider that temporarily bars the Federal Reserve from creating a digital dollar, a provision about central bank digital currency sitting inside a housing affordability bill, Washington being Washington. If you're finding this video useful, drop a comment and let me know. Are you more worried about home prices going up or mortgage rates staying high? Because those are two different problems with two different solutions, and I want to make sure we cover what actually matters to you. And if you haven't subscribed yet, the next video we're putting out goes deep on mortgage rates and what the Fed's current path actually means for buyers in 2026 and 2027. You don't want to miss that one. So let's bring this all together, because here's what actually changed. The 21st Century Road to Housing Act is the most significant housing legislation in over 3 decades. It's now law. The housing law aims to make homeownership more affordable, primarily by encouraging home building across the country. The supply-side provisions, streamlined environmental reviews, incentives for local governments to build, manufactured housing reforms, those are real and they could genuinely help over time. That part of the bill is solid. The corporate investor ban is the part that got all the attention, and it's also the part that's weakest on delivery. It targets a sliver of the market, doesn't force anyone to sell, and comes with a new construction loophole large enough to drive a real estate portfolio through. Some experts warn the ban could actually limit the supply of available homes because investors often buy and fix up homes that would otherwise fall out of the market. The political story around it is almost more interesting than the policy. Trump publicly demanded this bill pass, then called it a big yawn, then used it as leverage in an unrelated voting fight, then let it become law by default without his signature, all while the bill was co-written by his closest Senate ally and his most prominent Democratic critic. Its passage signals that lawmakers recognize the frustration many Americans feel about the high cost of housing. Whether the law actually relieves that frustration is a question that won't be answered for years. What changed from the beginning of this video to right now is this. You came in thinking a new housing bill passed and prices might come down. That's still possible, but you now know the mechanism is slower and more complicated than the headlines suggest. The bill's most dramatic provision has holes in it, and the law exists at all only because the Constitution has a 10-day clock that nobody can stop. That's not a reason to be cynical. It's a reason to watch what happens at the local level, because the legislation can play an important role in encouraging states and localities to make changes to expand housing supply, but it doesn't require them to make those changes. The federal government opened the door. Whether your city walks through it is a different story entirely. The next video on mortgage rates and what the Fed actually does next is already up. It's linked right now, and it picks up exactly where this one leaves off. Go watch it.